So this is where we have to be really clear about what we really mean by concrete reality. Because our ideas about what should be concrete are very much informed by this kind of mechanistic materialism. Like at some point we have to presume that realness and a capacity to participate in the world with other things are connected in some sort of way, right? Like that those really fundamentally are, I would say, basically identical, actually.
That's hard to argue with. I mean, it's almost a Zen koan. If a tree falls in a forest,
you've got a tree and you've got a forest, and so there's all kinds of relationships. They are purely perspectival, purely relative to our limited scope. Why not just say that our entire experience of the world is just an illusion? And at that point, you don't have science anymore. You have to have some kind of actual contact with a real world, indicated within your understanding of what human experience is, or you don't have empiricism anymore. You have all these different perspectives, and things look different from those different perspectives. The phenomenology has this kind of variability to it in the way that manifestations can occur. But then we can start to see through that, through this kind of insight, which is exactly the kind of insight that is implicated by science, by Goethe, by Steiner, seeing through the manifest into that which creates the phenomenological. So there's a phenomenology of the pre-sensory, as it were. So the language that Gebser uses here, he says that within that kind of aperspectival consciousness, the world is rendered transparent. Like we're literally seeing through the physicality of things into that which gives rise to that physicality. And so this is, I think, how we begin to really step out of a purely perspectival way of seeing things that's beginning to just devour itself and destroy itself, and into a way of seeing things where it's more like a kind of pluralism.
So you can say that because there is a different perspective based off of your vantage point, that there's no shared reality. Right? There's the fracturing eternally. Or you can say that the different perspectives on the same phenomenon are giving you this higher dimensional perspective of what that actually is.
And so this is exactly what Bergson was getting at, right? This is exactly what Goethe was getting at. It all comes together into this idea that matter itself it's not little BBs. The materiality of things is a kind of composite image, and that, Gebser was actually friends with Pablo Picasso, and Picasso wasn't completely unconscious of this. He kind of understood that that's what he was doing. But yeah, this compositeness thing is important here, I would say.
I mean, I think that that's a useful and fruitful way of coming back to the idea that there is something unifying and underlying. Because if the project of postmodernism has been anything, it has been the project of there not being a thing in and of itself. And that seems to be a disaster, because it brings in all of these just massive fractures inside of a society where how can you possibly agree on anything if there's no ground truth?
Right, and this goes right back to what we were saying about disempowerment. If there's no underlying reality, then there can be no underlying reality to what our shared purposiveness should be. We relinquish our capacity to steer the damn ship, and then who's steering it? Now that question then leads us right back to what I was saying about the purposiveness of technologies, including economic technologies. They aren't just inert things. They have an inbuilt teleology as well that will eat the world, I would say, if we let it. Heidegger was obsessed with this. He especially in his later career, he keeps on talking about the way that technology is unworlding the world, is the way that he put it. Again, very apocalyptic, but that's a real concern. And so moving beyond that kind of perspectival awareness into something that kind of transcends that in some sort of way it's not just getting out of a trap. it's moving into a way of perceiving reality that has never happened before. You know, shaman living in the Amazon, seeing spirits and everything. It's not like that worldview can accommodate the idea that someone from a different culture could see different aspects of the same reality. For a person, that it is very literalist in a way. It's just like, this is how it is, period. But now we've got this, we're seeing into this kind of multidimensionality. I think that is a good way of thinking about it, that has never been visible to human beings before. Not really.
And I think that's a healthy way forward for our science and for our inquiry as well, where we're able to, there's perspectives that you should probably be open to considering, even though they don't go along with the way that you see things. It's like, that's where the real progress happens, as far as I can tell. And right now, the way that science is done is it's very zero sum. It's like my idea or the highway. And so I think that that's actually a really promising future for
ultimately, it's synthesis. It's, instead of saying that it is either this or that, it is to say that, well, it's probably both. And
right. Yeah.
Surely we can get farther with that than by staking a claim and saying it can be only this forevermore, because clearly that doesn't appear to be the case when you look out onto the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so then when we look at Steiner, for example, I mean, Steiner's not just drifting off into the clouds. You know, he's saying some far out stuff. But what does he actually think he's doing? He thinks he's doing exactly what Gebser's describing, exactly what Goethe's describing. When we see through things, as it were, into that kind of compositeness. I mean, what we're doing, we're seeing the spirit world. That's effectively what it amounts to. I think Carl Jung was doing the exact same thing. There's so much more to things, and that perspectival kind of birth canal that we had to very precariously make our way through is allowing for the possibility of that. And once you start looking at the world in that way, it starts to get real weird.